Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Since October 7, Israel has been accused of committing genocide and ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. However, this discussion stayed on social media platforms among the media outlets, and people were arguing whether or not Israel has committed or is committing these acts of crimes in the Gaza Strip. Now, for the first time, we have a country like South Africa instituting a proceeding against Israel in the International Court of Justice under the Genocide Convention. And today, in order to discuss this, I'm joined by Alfred de Zayas. He's a lawyer and expert on human rights and international law between 2012 and 2018. He served as the first UN independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order appointed by the UN Human Rights Council. Thank you very much, sir, for being my guest today. It's a really pleasure to have you on my channel.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's a great pleasure. Actually, I will just screen this document of what the court published, International Court of Justice. This document came from the International Court of Justice. It says on the 29th of December 2023, South Africa filed an application instituting proceedings against Israel before the International Court of Justice, the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, concerning alleged violations by Israel of its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So here we're speaking about the Genocide Convention in relation to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. According to the application, acts and omissions by Israel are genocidal in character as they are committed with the requisite specific intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza as a part of the broader Palestinian national, racial, and ethnical group, and that the conduct of Israel through its state organs, state agents, and other persons and entities acting on its instructions or under its direction, control, or influence in relation to Palestinians in Gaza is in violation of its obligations under the Genocide Convention. The applicant further states that Israel, since October 7, 2023, in particular, has failed to prevent genocide and has failed to prosecute the direct and public incitement to genocide, and that Israel has engaged in, is engaging in, and risks further engaging in genocidal acts against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. I think many people, sir, are asking me the first question, like, why the South Africa instituted this proceeding in the International Court of Justice and not in the International Criminal Court, for example. What jurisdiction International Criminal Court of Justice has over Israel, and what powers do they have over Israel?
Well, the International Court of Justice has much more power than the International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court, unfortunately, I used to be a great advocate of it, and I wrote about it 40 years ago, 30 years ago, before we had the statute, and I worked very closely with Professor Sherif Bassiouni at the time that this was gestating before we had this statute of Rome. Unfortunately, it's been totally politicized. And the current prosecutor general really does not deserve any trust on our part. I mean, the first thing he did when he took his mandate from Fatou Bensouda was to discontinue the investigation into the war crimes and crimes against humanity by NATO forces in Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, that's shocking. Even Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, alerted the court, you are going to lose your authority and your credibility. And then there are two cases concerning Venezuela, Venezuela 1 and Venezuela 2. Venezuela 1 is a political case put up by this now defunct Grupo de Lima. They managed to get enough votes to send it up to the International Criminal Court, investigating, alleged torture and crimes committed by Nicolas Maduro. Now, the fact is that I was the first United Nations rapporteur to go to Venezuela in 21 years. I wrote a long report on my visit to Venezuela. By the way, I also paved the way for opening an office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Caracas, and for the first visit by a High Commissioner at that time, Michelle Bachelet, which took place in 2021. It was a very successful mission. And in any event, the Venezuelan government also proposed a case which was registered under Fatou Bensouda, called Venezuela 2, which is an investigation, very necessary, of the adverse impacts of unilateral coercive measures in Venezuela. As everybody knows, the economy of Venezuela has been devastated, asphyxiated by the total financial blockade by the United States, by overcompliance by businesses and by governments who don't want to risk any problem being penalized by the Department of the Treasury. Result is that, as Jeff Sachs wrote in his study together with Mark Weisbrot back in 2019, at least 40,000 Venezuelans died in the year 2018 because they couldn't get insulin, or they couldn't get retroviral drugs. They couldn't have access to cancer treatment. They had no access to dialysis, etc., all directly linked with the so-called sanctions.
Yes.
Well, what's interesting is that Karim Khan discontinued Venezuela to continue the case against Maduro. Interesting, 5 states have presented a case to the ICC, and those were Algeria and Djibouti, and these 5 countries sent the case to the International Criminal Court, and that actually is a make or break moment for the ICC, because if the ICC that indicted Vladimir Putin does not indict Benjamin Netanyahu,
Yes.
well, forget it. Just put it away. Forget the ICC. You'll need a different international criminal court, and not the one we have right now. But the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, I have a lot of trust in the ICJ, and I know personally several of the judges. And over the years, over the last 40 years, I have personally interacted with many of the judges. And that is a different kettle of fish. Here you have really top jurists who know international law inside and out. And South Africa was completely within its right to forward the case to the International Court of Justice. Article 9 provides that disputes between the contracting parties relating to the interpretation, application, or fulfillment of the present convention, including those relating to the responsibility of a state for genocide or for any of the other acts enumerated in Article 3, shall be submitted to the International Court of Justice at the request of any of the state parties to the dispute. Now, that is a direct referral, doesn't have to go through the filter of the Security Council. You have, the International Court of Justice has immediate jurisdiction. And as you may know, on the 10th and 11th of this month, they will have hearings. And one thing you didn't mention, although it was on the facsimile you put on your streaming, the most important thing is the request for an order of interim measures of protection, what is called provisional measures. And that means an order to stop the war, and an order to immediately have a ceasefire and to negotiate peace. That I expect will happen. It is much easier, and we have a lot of precedents where the International Court of Justice will issue an order for interim measures of protection. That is provided for under Article 41 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice. All states parties to the United Nations are automatically state parties to the International Court of Justice, so they can't opt out. So here again, a moment of truth, a moment in which the ICJ has to show the world that it means it, that the rule of law will be applied to everybody, not just to those countries that are targeted by the United States or by the European Union or whatever. They must, in this case, show maximum objectivity, maximum neutrality, and I am confident that they will. Now, we've had cases of genocide brought to the court before. Bosnia and Herzegovina brought a case against Serbia. And the important aspect of the judgment, they did not find that Serbia had committed genocide because they couldn't find the smoking gun. They couldn't find any statement by Milosevic or any statement by the Serbian government inciting to genocide or ordering, the destruction in whole or in part of the Bosnian people. And what happened is that you had this horrendous massacre called Srebrenica, where up to 8,000 prisoners of war were simply liquidated. Now, that was found to be a form of genocide by the International Criminal Court for the former Yugoslavia. When the case is presented by Bosnia, hoping to get compensation from Serbia, the International Court of Justice was not going to second guess the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. So they went along that Srebrenica was genocide, but since they didn't have any proof of any order or any knowledge, even knowledge, on the part of Milosevic or of the Serbian government that this was going to happen, they could not find Milosevic guilty. Now, what happened, and that is what is going to catch a lot of people, in the Palestinian case, in the Gaza case, there is a vicarious responsibility. Serbia was convicted of not doing the necessary to prevent genocide. So here was not the active commission of genocide by Serbia, but it was the failure of Serbia to
prevent,
to rein in the Serbs of the Republika Srpska, the Serbian part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and prevent them from committing genocide. Who is going to be hit by this violation of the convention? The United States. Because the United States has failed to stop the killing, and it's complicit in the killing. I mean, it is such a disgrace that the United States actually dared to put in a veto against the Security Council resolution. Was only one veto, the United States. France voted in favor of it. The United Kingdom didn't quite dare, so they abstained. But it was 13 votes in favor, 1 abstention, 1 veto by the United States. That makes the United States complicit. And what is important is that under, quite classical interpretation of the convention, what are the crimes? Since the intent is already proven. I mean, the statements are amazing. What Netanyahu and his ministers have said. That shows more than enough the intent to destroy in whole or in part the Palestinian people. Now, here you have Article 2 that defines genocide as A, killing members of the group, B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, and C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part.
Yes.
Absolutely clear. All three have been committed. And then Article 3 says that the following acts shall be punishable: genocide, conspiracy to commit genocide, direct and public incitement to commit genocide. If you see what some American politicians, American senators have been saying, and congressmen, I mean, they are guilty of direct and public incitement to commit genocide. And then attempt to commit genocide, and most importantly, Article 3, paragraph little e, complicity in genocide.
Yes.
The United States is complicit in the genocide. And so is the European Union. So is the United Kingdom. That's why this case is so incredibly important. The president of Turkey has endorsed South Africa's move on Wednesday this week, yesterday. And so I expect that more countries will join. But again, genocide is an erga omnes obligation to prevent.
Yes.
I mean, all states members of the United Nations are obliged to prevent genocide. So to the extent that we in the collective West have failed to do so, to the extent that we have delivered the weapons that are killing the Palestinians. And then another thing, the Palestinians have a right to self-determination. That has been stated again and again and again, not only by the General Assembly every year, but also by the Security Council. The governments of Israel since 1967 have disregarded all of the resolutions of the United Nations and any number of United Nations bodies to implement as soon as possible the two-state solution, to implement the recognition of Palestine as a state and as a member of the United Nations. So things are moving. I'm actually quite elated that governments are finally waking up to the destruction of the credibility of the United Nations and the destruction of the credibility of the ICC and of the institutions that are there to protect our rights, not by Russia or China, but it's being destroyed by the United States. It's being destroyed by this absolutely aberrant way of trying to interpret international law with double standards. I mean, the moment that you are applying double standards, international law a la carte,
Yes.
today like this, tomorrow like that, you have no credibility.
Yeah.
And
So did you see the statement of John Kirby yesterday about this
yeah, he
case?
denied it. He said that there's no evidence.
Yeah, I
sorry.
want to play for the audience just to see what he said in this case.
This 84-page lawsuit against Israel, accusing them of genocide. Israel says that this is blood libel. Does Washington agree? And where does this put Washington and Pretoria?
We find this submission meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact whatsoever.
It feels like they're shooting themselves in the leg, right?
We've been doing that for decades. And there's so much talk about apologetics for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. There's so much talk about negationism. I mean, those who deny the Holocaust. Well, here we're having a situation of denial of the genocide that is occurring right now in Gaza. And it's most important that also that your listeners understand that the war did not start on the 7th of October, 2023. The war started back in 1947 and 1948 with the Nakba. It started when Israel committed ethnic cleansing on a grand scale against the Palestinians. And the Palestinians, since Resolution 194 bar Roman 3 of 1948, the Palestinians have a right to return to their homeland.
Yes. According to the UN resolutions.
That has been completely ignored by Israel. Also, an advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on the 9th of July, 2004, outlining all of the serial violations of international law, of the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, of the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, etc., by Israel. And then the 120-page advisory opinion ends with very concrete, pragmatic recommendations how to fix the problem. None of them were respected. Now, again, a disgrace. The advisory opinion was adopted by a vote of 14-1. And the one was, of course, the late American judge Thomas Bergenthal, whom I knew very well because I was secretary of the Human Rights Committee. I was head of the petitions department, so I was registrar. And he was an expert in the Human Rights Committee before he was appointed to the International Court of Justice. So here you have in 2004 a rather disgraceful odd man out, the vote by Thomas Bergenthal against this, what I would call a school book example of a perfect, logical, coherent advisory opinion, which is not the case with some of the other advisory opinions. If you read the advisory opinion on Western Sahara or you read the advisory opinion on nuclear weapons, it's neither here nor there, etc. The one on the wall is a perfect example of a good advisory opinion. So that is something important for everybody to understand, that in principle, Israel has no right to self-defense because Israel is an occupying power. You have a right of self-defense of your own territory, but not when you have stolen the territory, not when you have actually ethnically cleansed the population that was there before and brought in your settlers. Now, who has a right of self-defense? The Palestinians, since 1947, 1948. Now, that does not mean that Hamas did not commit egregious war crimes, and I would say crimes against humanity, on the 7th of October. I mean, those who have seen and the documents on what happened on the 7th of October, it is shocking. But again, I make a parallel here. I'm a historian. I not only have my law degree from Harvard, and I was a member of the New York Bar and of the Florida Bar. I'm retired now. In any event, not only am I a lawyer, I am a historian. I have a doctorate in history from the University of Göttingen in Germany. I went to Germany on a Fulbright, and then I ended up getting my doctorate in history. Now, I wrote my dissertation on the Second World War, and I'm very familiar with the records, for instance, of the Warsaw Ghetto.
Yes.
I mean, the Germans had packed in the hapless Jewish population into the ghetto in Warsaw. And then after sieging the population for years and having a situation comparable to that in Gaza, a situation of hunger, people dying of hunger
Yes.
in Warsaw. Well, finally, there was an uprising. Finally, and the Jews had every right to rise up against the Nazis. And what happened? Genocide. The Nazis came and wiped them out, just crushed them. And those who survived were then sent off to Auschwitz or Sobibor or Treblinka or whatever. So what we're seeing here is a situation where a besieged population, in this case the Palestinians of Gaza, after 16 years of an illegal blockade, after 16 years of hunger, after 16 years of being cut off, they try to break out. They, it's an uprising. And horrible what they did, absolutely disgusting. And those responsible must be held to account. But that does not in any way, shape, or form justify Israel in what it is doing today. And in classical international humanitarian law, when I'm saying international humanitarian law, I mean the Geneva and Hague Conventions. There are two principles, only two core principles of international humanitarian law. The principle of distinction between civilians and combatants, and the principle of proportionality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Hamas incursion into the kibbutz, etc., killed 1,200 people. Now, by now, Israel has killed 22,000 people in Gaza, maybe more by now, including about a third to a half of children.
Yes.
And they've devastated hospitals. They've devastated all, shall we say, protected localities. So they're doing total war on a civilian population. That is clearly a crime against humanity, certainly falls within the ambit of Article 7 of the Statute of Rome. And if we had a better prosecutor general, rather than this Brit from Pakistani origin, Karim Khan, if you had a really professional and objective prosecutor general, he would take it up and he would have to indict not only Netanyahu, but everybody else involved, including the United States. The U.S. veto carries with it complicity in the genocide. So you see how huge the issue is. And again, I am in a way optimistic that change is on the way. I mean, it took certainly a lot of courage on the part of South Africa to bring the case, but I expect that many other countries will join South Africa in supporting the application that South Africa made. And of course, the United States directly or indirectly will try to apply coercive measures and will threaten with sanctions and will cut the whatever support is given to the African Union, etc., etc. I mean, that is to be expected. But I mean, there's something called honor. There's something called values. And the Africans have both honor and values. And the Africans are state parties to the Genocide Convention. And it's a disgrace, actually, that it had to be an African country that would bring this case to the International Court of Justice. I would have wanted to see France, the mother of human rights, so-called, bringing the case to Brussels? Or why not Belgium? Or why not the Netherlands? Or why not the Swedes and the Norwegians and the Danes, who go around saying, I mean, we are human rights? Well, put your money where your mouth is. This is something that I really admire of the Africans, that they have themselves decided this has to be done as a matter of honor. And we will see now how the 15 members of the International Court of Justice will argue this next week. I expect them to issue an order ordering a ceasefire, which of course will be ignored.
Yeah, what happens if Israel ignores this? This will be my.
The United States has ignored every judgment against it. The United States, when back in the 1990s, two German brothers, the Legrand brothers, were arrested for complicity in a murder of one individual. It was a botched up burglary in Texas, and so they killed the owner, etc., etc. They had essentially no defense. The German consul was not involved. They basically, their trial was so flawed that I would say they would have gotten convicted, of second degree, third degree murder, but certainly not of first degree murder. Or they could have been, convicted of manslaughter or whatever. So the case, Germany brought the case against the United States. The court ordered the United States not to execute the boys. They were very young. Huh? They were like 19 and 18 or something like that. In any event, the United States, of course, executed them. There was then the Havana case concerning 51 Mexicans. And there again, there was an order not to execute them. And several states did respect the order. Illinois respected the order. Oklahoma respected the order. But Texas didn't. Several other states didn't. So, and nothing happened to the United States. And back in 1986, there was the famous military and paramilitary activities of the United States in Nicaragua case. The judgment of 1986 condemned the United States clearly for violation of a whole series of international law rules, and imposed responsibility, and they quantified the amount of compensation that had to be paid to Nicaragua. The United States didn't pay a cent. So the United States gets away with it because the International Court of Justice does not have an army. The United States International Court of Justice can only issue an order, can only issue a judgment. The judgment is binding, without a doubt. It is binding. And there is responsibility of states. And you would hope that because of the respect that is due to the International Court of Justice, that a country that is ostensibly under the rule of law, namely the United States, would actually respect it. So, I mean, if you are part of the international community, you're supposed to live according to the rules of the international community, meaning the United Nations Charter. What I always tell my students, and I am still professor here, I show this to my students all the time. The Charter of the United Nations. And I say, look, guys, this is the only rules-based international order we have. We don't need another one. It's just that because the United States doesn't want to abide by the Charter of the United Nations, that they have invented this concept of rules-based international order. I write about it in my human rights trilogy. I published 2021, 2022, 2023, 3 books. This one, Building a Just World Order, 2021, Clarity Press, Atlanta, Georgia. And I formulate 25 principles of international order that, of course, if they were observed, we wouldn't have the mess that we have in Ukraine. We wouldn't have the mess that we have in Yemen. We wouldn't have the mess that we have in Gaza. This is my latest one. This is the human rights industry. Now, that book poses a constitutional question. What do you do when the institutions created to protect your rights, to advance your rights, betray you? What do you do when instead of prosecuting the United States, United Kingdom, Australia for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Afghanistan and Iraq, the prosecutor simply discontinues the investigation? Back 2,000 years ago, the Roman author Juvenalis posed the question, quis custodiet ipsos custodes? Who is going to be guarding the guardians? Who is going to make sure that the guardians of the law are doing their work?
Yeah.
Only we can be the guardians, nobody else. And that's why I'm saying civil society is so important. The social networks, social media is so important because, unfortunately, the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, Wall Street Journal, the BBC, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, the Die Zeit, Le Monde, etc., they all engage in what I call not only fake news, they suppress information. It's a combination of giving you half-truths and suppressing information that will alert you that there's really a whole other narrative that you have to come to grips with.
Yes.
And so the social media can save us from the fake news that we get in the New York Times and elsewhere. Now, who will guard over the guardians? As I say, we. And I think we have reached a point that the American people should be going out on the streets by the millions and saying, we want education, we want healthcare, we want infrastructures, we want clean air, and we don't want our tax dollars being used to commit genocide. We don't want our tax dollars used to send weapons to Israel to commit genocide in Gaza. We don't want our tax dollars to be used to send Abrams tanks and missiles and drones to Ukraine to kill more civilians in Lugansk and in Donetsk, etc., etc.
Or in my country, Syria. Even in Syria,
what the United States has done in Syria is unbelievable, because the United States has zero right to be in Syria, and it is stealing the Syrian oil. I mean, nobody invited the United States to Syria. I am no friend of Vladimir Putin. I'm no friend of the Russians, but the legitimate president of Syria did invite Russia to assist in his fight against terrorism and against an uprising that was not, shall we say, a homegrown uprising. It's not a question of the self-determination of the people, of Syria. It's not the question of the Arab Spring in Syria. It's a question that, as we know from General
Davy?
the General Walters. I have a quote from him in the chapter on the right to peace. It is amazing how the United States had decided, I mean, the neocons, the Victoria Nulands and the Robert Kagans, etc., had decided that we were going to overthrow 7 countries in the region,
Yes.
starting with Iraq, and then all the others were to follow. So, see whether I finally.
Wesley Clark.
No, I'm looking for the quote because it's so revealing, and of course, Syria was targeted by the United States. It was an intention to. Let me see. Where is it? Going to the index.
Are we speaking about General Wesley Clark?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I play the video for you? I have the video here in my hand, just for the people.
Because it's so important.
Just for the people to refresh their memory what happened.
Yeah.
I will play it now.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today. And he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So,
well, if that is not proof of an animus on the part of the U.S. government to, well, be the imperial power and just change governments at will, massive violation of the UN Charter, massive violation of international law, with total impunity and with the complicity of the media, because the media has sold the war in Syria as a war for human rights. I mean, we are supposed to kick out Assad because he's a dictator and because he's corrupt and because he's a criminal. And then we want to try him. Not only that, I mean, we want to replace him with a puppet from Washington, and then we want to try Assad. I'm not defending Assad. He's not a friend of mine. On the other hand, as I said here in my book, Chapter 7, The Prohibition of Interference in the Internal Affairs of States, it starts with the quotation by General Wesley Clark, which you just showed your audience. Now, that means responsibility of the United States for war crimes and crimes against humanity. And every time that the United States bombs Syria, it's another violation of international law, which requires compensation to the Syrian people. People tend to forget that. The United States owes the world trillions of dollars in compensation for all the damage that it has done over 100 years of overthrowing governments. I don't know whether you know the book by Stephen Kinzer, came out back in 2006, called Overthrow. And he documents countless interventions of the United States in Honduras and in Grenada and in Haiti and in Santo Domingo and of course in Africa and in Asia to put puppets who will do our bidding and not allow the democratic process to function, whether it be in Syria or in any other country in the world. We know better. We can tell them who is going to be a good leader for them. By the way, I didn't want to forget, because what is happening in Gaza is really very, very serious. And if there is something called responsibility to protect, and I think it's basically a scam that we cooked up so that we could circumvent
Intervene.
the prohibition of the use of force, so that we could go selectively and change governments where we want to change governments and say, oh, it's for humanitarian reasons. But here you have an honest book.
Yeah, I have read this book.
Palestine Peace, Not Apartheid. I also like very much his book, We Can Have Peace in the Holy Land. I can recommend it to all of your listeners. And I don't know whether you have an audience in the United States.
Most of the audience is from the United States, actually.
Yeah. In any event, it is important that people realize that what I'm saying, I'm not rediscovering the Mediterranean. I am not rediscovering the wheel or the wheelbarrow. I am saying what many other people have said, including Professor Richard Falk, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Professor John Mearsheimer, etc. And they know what they're talking about. The sad thing is that our government, quis custodiet ipsos custodes, has betrayed us. We don't have any accountability from Washington. They are basically dictators. They're telling us, and I'm an American citizen, it's my government that is betraying me. And, whether you vote Republican or Democrat, it doesn't make much of a difference because both parties are sold out on the military-industrial complex. They're both for Wall Street. They're both for Israel. Nobody is for the Palestinians. Nobody gives a damn about the Palestinians. So that there's no real choice. I mean, I am disenfranchised in practice in the United States because when I vote, actually, there are a couple of good senators. There are a couple of good congressmen and congresswomen. But when I vote, I usually vote a write-in candidate. Back in 2016, I couldn't vote for Trump and I couldn't vote for Hillary Clinton. So I wrote in Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. That was 2016. 2020, I was not going to vote Trump or, for that matter, Biden. I wrote in Tulsi Gabbard, the American congresswoman from Hawaii. Protest vote. But it's just simply to mark my discontent with a government that is ostensibly democratic, but it is only window dressing.
Yes.
So you probably still have more questions on Gaza.
Actually, the beauty of the discussion with you was that I prepared 8 questions, and while I'm listening to you, you're answering to the questions with before I even answer you the questions. It was an amazing conversation with you. I consider it an educational because for me, it's very important for my brain to feel like attracted to the information that is coming. So I just stay silent, and I'm also trying to learn from you. I really appreciate your sharing the knowledge, the time with me and the audience of Syriana Analysis. I just want to ask you one last question, and
Well,
that is
before you
how.
ask the last question, I really wanted
Yeah.
to say something about Nagorno-Karabakh.
Yes, please.
I wrote a book, 2010, Haigazian University in Beirut. I lectured in Beirut. I wrote a book called The Genocide Against the Armenians, 1915-1923. It did not end with the Ottoman Empire. It continued under Kemalist Turkey. I'd be prosecuted in Turkey for saying that if you say anything against Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, it's a violation of Articles 301 and 305 of the Turkish Penal Code. So I don't go there. And if I go there as a tourist, I'm incognito. I'm not going to make statements. But as the case may be, I've been in Yerevan. I've spoken in Yerevan at the American University and at a big conference we had in Yerevan back in 2005. I'm very familiar with the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. And when you had the blitzkrieg against Nagorno-Karabakh in 2020, I already warned that that was a continuation of the genocide. And that, if R2P meant anything, it also applied to Nagorno-Karabakh. We were having there an aggression and an ethnic cleansing. And then, of course, now, 2023, the continuation and expulsion of the hapless population of Nagorno-Karabakh. They have a right to self-determination. Self-determination is a jus cogens right under Articles 1 and 55 of the UN Charter, under Article 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. It's been reaffirmed in countless resolutions of the General Assembly, of the Security Council, of the Human Rights Council, etc., etc. The Armenians have the right of self-determination, but nobody cares.
Yes.
Particularly, the media doesn't care. The media in the United States tends to be more favorable to Azerbaijan. I mean, Azerbaijan has committed a clear violation of Article 6, or rather Article 5 and 6, but Article 5 of the Rome Statute, which is the article on the crime of aggression. They committed a clear case of aggression in the year 2020 and again in 2023 within the definition of Kampala, which was adopted in 2010 in Uganda at the meeting of states parties of the Rome Statute. In any event, Nagorno-Karabakh is yet another example of how the press suppresses information, how the press does not alert the American people, the European people, that here an absolutely unacceptable case of genocide is taking place, that we're having in Europe a massive ethnic cleansing, and nobody cares because it's only the Armenians. And I mean, that hurts me as someone who spent his entire life working in the human rights field in various capacities. This selectivity, this lack of, shall we say, compassion.
Yeah.
There's no compassion. The press is cynical. The press is really aberrant. The articles that I read at the time, and the BBC interviewed me, by the way, on Nagorno-Karabakh. And the first thing I said, this is a case of responsibility to protect. We must protect the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. First thing I said. Second thing I said, every country, state party to the Genocide Convention, should send this up to the International Court of Justice under Article 9. It applies, the same as it applies in Gaza. It applied for Nagorno-Karabakh. Nobody did it. And I spoke with several ambassadors, because I know many ambassadors here because of my work in the Human Rights Council. So it is a great disappointment, quis custodiet ipsos custodes, that the institutions that are there are not doing their work, are not being effective. Now back to you.
Actually, I remember what happened in 2020 and 2023. It was very horrendous to see all these so-called humanitarian NGOs were just there, like the USAID organization, facilitating the ethnic cleansing of the Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh by giving them blankets and food, some cans of tuna or some food for them. And then once they deported all these Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh, and nobody asks about them anymore, right?
No.
We have 120,000 Armenians were forcefully, like they were ethnically cleansed from Nagorno-Karabakh, and the international community under rules-based order, they need the gas of Aliyev now, because they don't want to get gas from Putin, and now they can get gas from Aliyev. So gas is, of course, more valuable than the lives of the human beings. Unfortunately, this is the case, and that is why when you said the importance of social media and the people on social media creating a sort of social pressure, and people really underestimate this, and this is why I encourage people to speak up, because people underestimate
millions of people on the street.
Yeah,
it doesn't always work, because I was on the street myself in 2003 demonstrating against the threatened aggression by the United States against Iraq.
yes.
I mean, there were millions of people in Rome, in Milan, in Paris, in London, in Manchester, in Liverpool, in Berlin. Millions of people on the streets. And you had a so-called coalition of the willing engaging in a total revolt against international law, a revolt against the UN Charter, a revolt against the rule of law. And when I talk about the rule of law, note for yourself, maybe go on the website. I'm a member of an NGO called legalpact.org.
Yes.
So www.legalpact.org. And our plan is to have a new social contract. And we want to be part of the Summit of the Future that Antonio Guterres has called for this year. Now, what do I want to see out of the Summit of the Future? I want to see rule of law. I want to see an expansion of the regional court system. I want to see enforceable human rights. I want to see an international court of justice that faithfully applies the UN Charter and international law. I want to see an international criminal court that faithfully applies the Statute of Rome. By the way, I write about that in this chapter. The bottom line, the voting record of states in the General Assembly, Human Rights Council, Security Council, etc. I think it's very revealing that we're living in an Orwellian world in which, actually worse than Orwellian, is 1984. Well, that's too obvious. We're actually in the brave new world that we read about in Aldous Huxley, because it's like soft. It's like an iron fist in a velvet glove. And it's been very gradual how we have been robotized, how we have been manipulated, how we have been brainwashed, how we have been indoctrinated to the point that most Americans are convinced that we are the good guys by definition. We can do no wrong. Our government is there to bring democracy,
Yes.
human rights to the Syrians and to the Ukrainians and to the Russians and to the Tunisians. So we are do-goodish, and people actually believe it. I mean, I have friends graduated with me at Harvard. I have friends who are lawyers in Washington and New York, and they're gung-ho for the United States and for supporting Israel in its genocide against. So don't underestimate the power of indoctrination, the power of the mainstream media. And when I say mainstream media, I mean New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, television, Hollywood, the way we create stereotypes, the way we label people like Assad or like Putin as war criminals and corrupt and whatever you want, so that it makes it more palatable.
Yes.
It makes it more plausible that we are a bit, shall we say, loose in our interpretation of international law, and that we say we're going to bomb the hell out of Iraq, and we're going to bomb the hell out of Afghanistan and out of Syria, and we're going to steal the Syrian oil in total impunity. And but one day the chickens are going to come home to roost, and that is what I'm concerned about, because you realize we in the United States have a national debt of $34 trillion. Essentially, we're bankrupt. The rest of the world is financing the United States, and the moment that de-dollarization accelerates, the moment that people no longer put their money in dollars, but they put it in other reserve currencies, the moment that trade does not occur primarily in dollars, I mean, the American economy is going to go way down. And we bear responsibility for it. It's we ourselves who have done that to ourselves. And our neocons in Washington, in their dream world, they think that we're still the unipolar world of 1990, 1991, when the Soviet Union disappeared and we were the only superpower. Well, whether we like it or not, China is there and it's not going away. And India is there and it's not going away. And Russia is there. So if we don't seek a modus vivendi, if we don't seek a way of living together with everybody, which they're going to say with the Russians and the Chinese, but no, I want to live together with everybody. I mean, that is, of course, the purpose of this.
Yeah.
We wanted, we the people, we wanted to have peace as a condition for the exercise of all human rights. We wanted to have peace for development. We wanted to have disarmament for development. And the sustainable development goals, forget it.
Yeah.
There's no way in the world that we're going to reach the sustainable development goals by 2030 if we increase rather than slash our military expenditures. So, I mean, when I hear the narrative from Washington or from Brussels and from this absolute idiot, Jens Stoltenberg, I'm horrified. I'm absolutely horrified that they seem to believe their own propaganda.
Yeah,
And
this is
that
really problematic. Yeah.
For all of us, a great problem. But I am still a believer. I still believe in the UN Charter. I still believe in human rights. I believe in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I believe in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. I want to see rights juridical, justiciable, and enforceable. And that's why, as I said, www.legalpact.org. Go in there, go on the blog, try to participate. We would like to have your listeners join, from Syria, but your listeners throughout the world join us in our work. We've had some good conferences at Berkeley Law School, and we had Ted Maron attending, and we had very prominent professors. So in any event, I recommend this to you. And if you have any friends at the university in Damascus and in Aleppo, I would like to see my 25 Principles of International Order translated into Syrian, translated into Arabic. And I'd like to see them taught at the college and university level.
Actually, I do have contacts with the universities there, and especially in the Faculty of International Law. And I will definitely get your email and put you in touch with a professor. She was the dean, my dean, and she taught me international law and international humanitarian law. I think that would be a great contact also for you, and also to translate this book to Arabic. Just quickly, sir, how long will this proceeding last in the International Court of Justice? And if Israel was condemned that it has committed a genocide and it was ordered to stop this operation there, what would happen to Israel?
Well, first of all, the first thing that's going to happen next week is the hearing on the order. Since the order is urgent, I expect the order to be issued. I think the credibility of the ICJ is at stake. They must issue an order for a ceasefire. Israel is now going to be checkmated because Israel tries to paint itself as a country of the rule of law, as the only democracy in the Middle East, etc., etc. The image of Israel is going to suffer enormously. But Israel, shall we say, is used to being condemned by the Human Rights Council and by the General Assembly because they know that there's no teeth behind it. What is necessary is for governments to stop dealing with Israel. Not sanctions. I mean, this is not a question of sanctions. This is a question of the sovereign right of France and Morocco and Algeria simply to stop all business with Israel. If Israel feels the heat, if Israel starts losing money, if Israel's economy goes downhill because of the war and because of a voluntary boycott by the African Union and by the ASEAN and by the BRICS countries, etc., that will bring Netanyahu down. And then you will have, there's plenty of people in Israel who totally disagree with Netanyahu. And there's plenty of Jewish professors, Jeffrey Sachs, Richard Falk, Noam Chomsky, who have been writing about this and who would welcome another Yitzhak Rabin, who could have brought peace to the Middle East if he had not been murdered by a Zionist fanatic. Now, this is something that people tend to forget. Peace is possible in the Holy Land, but you need readiness to compromise. And the governments of Israel have been characterized by hubris, by arrogance, and by humiliation of the Palestinians. And you can't get away with that forever. And I mean, Israel is shooting itself in the foot, has been doing so for a while, and the chickens are going to come home to roost. I mean, I have many friends in Jerusalem. I have friends in Haifa. I have friends in Tel Aviv, professor friends. I am terribly, terribly sorry for the Israeli people living there. And that is also the concern of Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs is a practicing Jew, and he wants Israel to be what Israel should be.
Yes.
A city on the hill. It should be a beacon. It should not be a country that engages in genocide. And I must say, it's a very painful thing for someone like Jeffrey Sachs to write these articles.
Yeah. He was
No.
a really vocal voice against this, the Gaza onslaught. Norman Finkelstein is also one of the prominent voices against this onslaught. He's also a prominent Jewish voice. Alfred de Zayas, thank you. Really, I really appreciate personally, first of all, that you accepted my invitation and you enriched my channel with information. I'm sure the audience of Syriana Analysis, hundreds of them were watching you right now. They also were enlightened by your expertise and with the information that you have given to them. So thank you so much for being my guest today. And we will definitely try to do a catch-up video on a later stage when there is a new update coming from the hearing.
You may want to tell your audience if they want to ask me questions. I have a very simple Gmail. Alfred de Zayas, all in lowercase, Alfred de Zayas @gmail.com. So if you have any questions, just send them over.
Guys, the email has been said. Also, his Twitter account and the X account will be now in the description below. You can also follow him and see what he's writing and proposing on his X account. And that was it for today, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much, Mr. Alfred de Zayas, for being my guest today. And we will see you guys tomorrow again.
Thank you very much.